Hey everybody, it's Friday and I'm ready to get started as soon as I get the tech streaming. I am going to be outlining 2 requests for this week. Let's just go ahead and cover Deuteronomy chapter 6 through 12. They were submitted by 2 different people. It's a lot to unpack, so I'm going to kind of give you a overview of how I would tackle this. So I'm not going to tackle the whole thing, but I'll walk you through the basics of it and go real detailed in chapter 6. And so grab your Bible, grab your notes, grab your highlighters, and let's get started. Okay, I want to make sure you can see this. Okay, so we're in Deuteronomy chapter 6. I'm using the Artisan Bible. I like to use different Bibles. I've been kind of on a kick with this one. I also use the Illustrating Bible. If you go to my faves page, people are always asking what Bible you're using. If you go to my faves page on amycenter.com/faves, I have all the Bibles that I own. Actually, I own a couple more actually that I need to put on there. But if you're ever looking at what is that Bible, this one is the Artisan Bible. I love it. It's just gorgeous and very simple with lots of room to write. So I've got lots of other study Bibles in there. If you're looking for like chronological Bible or a reading assignment for every day kind of Bible, I have all those different tips over on my faves page. So check those out. But today we are going to be outlining Deuteronomy 6 through 12. And before I forget, I have been working on something I've wanted to do for a long time. Now, this isn't the final product. This is my, I'm not going to show you my final product, but this is my cheat sheet of all the genealogies in the Bible from Adam to Mary and Joseph. And it's kind of a mess right now, but I wanted to just give you a sneak peek at what is coming next week in the shop. It is just a giant genealogy. It's been really, really fun to dive into that. What's special about this genealogy is I've actually included as many women as I can find. Now, typically genealogies are just the men in the family, so the men's lines of who was related to who is still intact, but the mamas are the ones having these babies. So I wanted to make sure to include their wives' names, or say if they were a widow of somebody. So I have been digging into a lot of that because I know us women, we want to have a voice, and these women are in the Bible. I'm not just making these up. So this is going to be an amazing resource, just a huge genealogy that you can tape together or put in a notebook to reference throughout your Bible study. So just a plug for that. I'll release that next week. So let's dig into Deuteronomy. Okay, so we're in Deuteronomy, and the first thing I like to do is go over to my cheat sheet to get an overview of the context that we're in. So if you have my cheat sheets, you can look on here on yours, or you can look at mine with me. And basically, I'm not looking at what's happening in chapter 6. I'm looking at where we left off, the context, so that I can get more depth into what chapter 6 is teaching us. So in Deuteronomy, this is Moses's final sermons. He does 3 sermons. Some people say 4, like the 4th one might be his closing remarks. But anyways, he does these final sermons, and basically he talks about let's go over everything we've been through. He's like given a sermon of their history. So he talks about taking them out of Egypt and then going to Mount Sinai and all the way to now they're about to go to the Promised Land. His second sermon is when we are in chapter 6. And this is where he is now reviewing the laws. So he's gone over the history that the Israelites have been in. And now this section of Deuteronomy, chapters all the way from 5 to 28, he's reviewing laws. And if you remember, the end of Exodus, all of Leviticus, and all of Numbers are about laws and commands that God's given him, or given the Israelites. So he's recapping those again in Deuteronomy. So where we pick up in chapter 6 is where he's talking about the laws regarding love the Lord. And so I want you to use these to kind of help you get context so you understand what you're studying. All right, here's how I decided to tackle this. As I'm reading through and glancing through, I'm seeing love the Lord your God is the title of this. So our greatest command, even in the New Testament, is to love the Lord your God. I'm not seeing this labeled as the commands of God. I'm seeing it as the love portion. So I really want you to consider that this isn't the Old Testament God isn't an angry, grumpy God. He's the same God he is in the New Testament. And so I want us to kind of see these rules through that lens. And so instead of us just being like, okay, these are the commands, decrees, and laws the Lord your God direct me to teach you, we could go through and just list every rule he has for them, but I want you to see more than that. So what I did was I came up with this little system. I saw these things happening over and over, the rules. I also saw his explanation of the rules. And then I also see these promises if you follow the rules. And so that's really interesting to me as a mom, because I constantly struggle with this. Do I just tell my kids, stop arguing with me, stop asking why, and just do it because I'm your mom? And honestly, sometimes I have to do that. And other times I will approach it as, this is why you're not allowed to ride your bike on the street. This is unsafe. This is what will happen to you. And then I might even like promise something. I promise that when you get older and you're more responsible and you show me that you can follow the rules, you'll be able to ride more places on your bike and things like that. So this really reminded me a lot of just parenting in general. And even like I'll parent, my son's personality is different than my daughter's personality. There's conversations I can have with him that will turn into a fight, and conversations with her that I know if we had the same thing, it would bring us closer together. So I find that really interesting. So as you're looking through this, look at it as a father speaking to his children. And what I want you to do is highlight in one color the commands, highlight in another color his reasoning for the command, and highlight in a third color his promises. So for example, these are the commands, decrees, and laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land you are crossing the Jordan to possess. That's his command. Here's why. So that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live, by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you, so you may enjoy long life. Okay, so again, command. Hear, Israel, be careful to obey. Why? His reasoning. So it may go well with you, and you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey. And then he promises something here. Just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. So I've highlighted that there. So what I did was I went through and I color-coded everything I was reading. And what I want to do with you right now is just pull out some of those little things and make a list of them. So his commands are chapter 6, verse 1. He wants Moses to teach them. He wants them to teach so people will keep them or follow. And why? Fear of the Lord. And we're going to get into what that means in a little bit. He also says long life. You can enjoy long life in verse 2. Increase greatly. Verse 3. And then he promises them the land of milk and honey. So I'm going to flip over to the other page. And there are some promises God makes that are good, like they'll be able to have the land of milk and honey. And there are some promises that are not so great that they don't want to be fulfilled. So he might say, if you do this, if you obey, this good promise is going to come true. And then other times he'll say, if you disobey, this bad promise is going to come through. It's just like when we parent our kids. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. In verse 4 or verse 5, it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your strength. And we hear this a lot in the New Testament, but it actually originated in the Old Testament. Okay, so love under commands. Love Lord with heart, soul, and strength. Okay, we're supposed to teach them to our children. We're supposed to write them on the door frames, so we're supposed to display them. Okay, and here's a promise in verse 10. When the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore your fathers to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to give you, a land with large flourishing cities you did not build, houses filled with all kinds of good things you did not provide, wells you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves you did not plant. Then when you eat and are satisfied, be careful you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. So his commandment is don't forget the Lord. And here are his promises. These ones have actually been fulfilled when he's talking about them, but they're still promises that he made. He gives you the land of milk and honey that has cities, houses, wells, vineyards, and olive groves. I'll give you a second to write those. Okay, so verse 13 of chapter 6, fear the Lord your God, serve him only, take your oaths in his name. Do not follow other gods, the gods of the people around you. So he says, don't follow other gods. And then he actually explains why. For the Lord your God who is among you is a jealous God. He says he's a jealous God. And he doesn't make excuses for that. His anger will burn against you. He will destroy you from the face of the land. So this is a promise. He says if you're following other gods, he's going to get angry and you're going to be punished. So that's a promise he has that is in the bad category. Anger of God. And then what was the wording? Destroy you. Okay, verse 16, do not put the Lord your God to the test as you did at Massah. Be sure to keep the commands of the Lord your God and the stipulations and decrees he's given you. Do what is right and good in the Lord's sight. So I'm going to say do good and right. Why? So that it may go well with you and you may go in and take over the good land. So it will go well. The good land the Lord promised an oath to your ancestors, thrusting out all your enemies before you, as the Lord said. So we already wrote that promise of getting the land, but here he promises he will thrust out enemies. Okay, down here, verse 24, the Lord commanded us to obey all these decrees and fear the Lord our God. The commandment was to fear the Lord. So why? We must always prosper and be kept alive, as is the case today. So we will prosper and live. Here's the promise. If we're careful to obey all this law before the Lord our God, as he's commanded us, that will be our righteousness. We will be righteous or considered righteous. Okay, chapter 7, I'm going to not do as detailed as chapter 6. I think you kind of get the gist. But what I want you to do is just highlight those 3 sections. It doesn't have to be the same colors, but pick 3 colors for the commands, the reasoning, and promise, and just keep adding to them. You could even write chapter 6, chapter 6, and then the next page write chapter 7, chapter 7, chapter 7, if you need more room. Otherwise, just keep building on these lists. This right here is talking about the enemies he's going to drive out. Some of these promises are just God's justice and his wrath. It says in chapter 7, verse 10, those who hate him, he will repay to their face by destruction. He will not be slow to repay to their face those who hate him. So this isn't just like you made a mistake. This is like people who actively hate him. I mean, when you look through some of these reasonings, they really make sense. He is compassionate as much as he is just. And so I want you to notice, I think a lot of times we read the Old Testament and it can be really hard because we just focus on these harsh verses, but see all the goodness that's sprinkled all throughout. And so you can kind of understand God's personality, his thinking. And so you won't understand everything. I think God has made it clear that he is God and we are not, and that's okay for us to not understand everything. But I want us to look through these with a lens of this is the same God as is in the New Testament. He knows Jesus is coming. He knows that the Israelites are going to fail. He knows that Isaiah is going to prophesy about Jesus is coming. Like, this was the plan from day one. So he is the same God in the Old and New Testament. So just read it like that, and I think you'll get a lot more insight. Right here, it says, you must destroy all the people the Lord your God gives over to you. So he wants them to destroy all the enemies. Why? For that will be a snare to you. So he's doing this to protect them because he knows that's going to be their downfall when they mix the nations. He says, don't be afraid of them. That's a command. Why? Because the Lord your God rescued you from Pharaoh in Egypt. Remember these things. So lots and lots and lots of promises, commands, and reasoning why. So go through chapters 6 through 12, which was the section that I was asked to outline, and do the same thing. So I'm not going to do all that for you, or we'll be here an hour, but I did want to skip over to chapter 10. Somebody specifically asked for me to outline chapter 10, and you could still do it the same exact way, but I'm going to change it up a little bit here to just give you another way to outline stuff. The first section of chapter 10 is more talking about the history, something that had happened in the Israelites' history over the past 40 years, where they were wandering the desert. This was right at the beginning when they were punished, when they went to Mount Sinai, and Moses went up to Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights, and he got the 10 Commandments, and he came down, and if you look at the chapter before, he's reminding them, oh yeah, remember when I was going up to get that stuff to celebrate that God had rescued us from Egypt, and I was bringing down his commandments, and you guys made a golden calf and started worshiping that. So that's what had just happened. He reminds them, and then says that he came, where is it? I just saw it. Verse 17 of chapter 9. So I took the 2 tablets and I threw them out of my hands, breaking them to pieces before your eyes. So if you didn't realize, Moses broke the 10 Commandments tablets and had to go back up and get a second set, which is hilarious to me. Like, that seems like God would just, I could just see God being like, what? Seriously, you have to go, you broke what I just gave you. You guys have already messed up. So over here, chapter 10, verse 1, at that time the Lord said to me, chisel out 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and come up to me on the mountain. Also make a wooden ark. I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablet, which you broke. So he's making you chisel them out this time. Then you are to put them in the ark. So here's what he's gotten. The ark. And he's going to put 2 new tablets go in the ark. Okay, so then Moses continues his story. I made the ark out of acacia wood, chiseled out 2 stone tablets. The tablets are stone. The ark is acacia wood. Let me zoom in so you can see this. Okay, so verse 3. I made the ark out of acacia wood and chiseled out 2 stone tablets like the first ones. I went up to the mountain with the 2 tablets in my hands. The Lord wrote on these tablets what he had written before, the 10 commandments he had proclaimed to you on the mountain out of the fire on the day of assembly, and the Lord gave them to me. Then I came back down the mountain and put the tablets in the ark I had made as the Lord commanded me, and there they are now. Okay, here's something else you can outline then it lists a bunch of people and places. So I went and highlighted the places in green and the people in blue, and you can list those out over here, whatever you want to do, but I'm not going to do that right now. And then I want you to look at the second section, which is called Fear the Lord. It says, I always struggled with fear the Lord, that phrase. And so I encourage you anytime you're struggling with a concept to look into it further. Find out what that means. Fear the Lord is not as intimidating a concept to me as it used to be. Fearing the Lord is about just realizing who he is, that you are not equals, and that that's a good thing. That he is the ultimate creator of the universe, and you don't have to lean on everything for your own knowledge to figure it out, and that he's going to help you because he knows more than you. You should fear him. He's authority. He is just a deity that we can't possibly understand. And when we have people in our lives that we fear, we kind of feel like we don't have respect for them, or we don't have a relationship with them. And this is a different kind of fear. This is where we still have that, like, realize you are not God, that kind of ego check. But at the same time, he is filling these verses with love and us being heirs and us being righteous and him wanting to rescue us and to obey him out of love and respect and things like that. So fear the Lord is a lot more complex than just that definition of the word fear we have in the English language. So I really, really encourage you to dig into that. I actually have an entire study on fear and anxiety that I dug into this a little bit in the shop. It's in a workbook. So anyways, I challenge you to use a concordance, look up fear the Lord, see the different contexts it's using. But right here, let's outline it in chapter 10, verses 12. It says, now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, and observe the Lord's commands and decrees I'm giving you today for your own good. So here's back here to the yellow of God's commands. I'm going to highlight that. Fear the Lord, walk in obedience to him, love him, serve the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, observe his commands, and why? It says for your own good. Okay, then it's reminding you of the greatness of God, that everything belongs to him. To the Lord your God belong the heavens, even the highest heavens, the earth, and everything in it. Yet the Lord set his affection on your ancestors and loved them, and he chose you, their descendants, above all the nations as it is today. So this is reiterating what I just went over, was we don't even have to be acknowledged by him. We are basically ants in this giant universe that he created. But he says, yet in his affection, he loves us. His affection on your ancestors and loved them. He chose you. So I love this. This is more of his why. His affection, his love. He chose us. And so what does he ask us to do? Circumcise your hearts, therefore. Do not be stiff-necked any longer. For the Lord your God is the God of gods and Lord of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality and accepts no bribes. He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing. So I'm going to do this in promise. He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing. You are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourself were foreigners in Egypt. Fear the Lord your God and serve him. So even in those verses we just read where it said destroy your enemies completely, he's not saying destroy everybody who doesn't look like you. He's saying the people that are worshiping other gods, the people who hate me, those things. And right here in the same sermon, he's telling them, defend the fatherless, defend the widow, love the foreigner, give them food and clothing, love those who are foreign. You were foreign yourself in Egypt. So it's not as black and white as we make it sometimes. And that's why I want you to dig in a little more, because just like on social media, you can write one sentence and people will just attack it from every viewpoint they have. And unless you get a context of who that person is, you won't understand what they're saying, which is why we're studying the Bible. And this is just one method that I like to do to help me understand who God is and why he commands us in the way he does and why he makes decisions the way he does, so that I can understand what decisions I should be making for myself. So over here, fear the Lord. Some of these questions you might have, you could list out, or you could just take the notes on other things that insights that you found. Walk in obedience. Love him. Serve with heart and soul. Observe commands. He does this, which I'm going to write in the orange, from the orange, for your own good. Okay, verse 14 or 15, he has affection and love for you. He chose you. He defends the fatherless, the widow, the foreigner. I love this section. Okay, let's turn the page. He is the one you praise, verse 21. He is your God who performed for you those great and awesome wonders you saw with your own eyes. Your ancestors who went down into Egypt were 70 in all, and now the Lord your God has made you as numerous as the stars in the sky. Who did he promise that to? Your ancestors will be as numerous as the stars in the sky. That was Abraham. That was a promise of God. Yeah, my star's been a little sick. Okay, this next section is very similar to chapter 6, love and obey the Lord. I'm going to do the same thing. I want you to outline this just like we did in chapter 6. And then for chapter 12, the one place of worship. This is more talking about their specific situation. They're in an area where they're in the land of milk and honey, and they're about to take it from the enemies. The enemies are being destroyed because they worship false gods and false idols. And so he talks about you need to remove all of their places where they make sacrifices and things. Don't reuse those for me. And then they're going to be making, they had this tabernacle that they're moving around from place to place, and eventually they'll make a temple that King Solomon will finish for them. So there's a lot here, which is why I'm not going to do every single verse, but I hope that was a great starting place for you to be like, okay, now I understand the context and how to tackle this. And so resources that you can look at are my timelines, commentaries, footnotes. BibleGateway.com is a great website if you want to look on there. As always, you can feel free to ask me any questions in the comment, or look at the link in the show notes that has where you can submit what you want me to outline next week. Thank you, girls, so much. I love, love, love that I have a huge list of suggestions to go through. Keep them coming, and I will see you next week.